Hello, it is Mike Levin on Wednesday, August 25th, 2021.
What are you doing?
And I am shooting a YouTube video here today, something a little bit unusual for me, shooting it while my daughter is with me on the trip. My child is with me as I rewire my lifetime of habits to make sure that I'm using the appropriate pronouns and gender neutral words.
I'll be back watching my hair.
Yeah, go ahead, do your thing, I'll do my thing. You know, she's part of the much more open-minded.
Literally just said.
You're right, I did. Lifetime of habits. They are much more into the new way than me and my lifetime of habits and gender encumbered pronouns, which I always thought was wrong. I never understood, you know, his story. Is it his story? That sounds awfully misogynist to me. So, you know, I've always tried to lean in my writing towards the more gender neutral words, and now I'm trying to do it in my speech in everyday life. You know, I should respect that. I am a open-minded, non-static person. There are plenty of people out there who take such offense to this, and especially it being brought to our children through the media. YouTube is not the only thing, you know, go watch Steven Universe.
YouTube is the only thing. YouTube is everything. YouTube is all. YouTube is amazing.
Yeah, YouTube is amazing. YouTube changes everything.
YouTube is my best friend.
There's, you know, more video going up by the minute in YouTube than people could watch in a lifetime.
By the minute, more like by the second. Do you know how many effing YouTubers there are?
Yeah.
There are, I think, 80 million TikTokers or more. How many YouTubers are there?
Well, I think TikTokers, the amount doing it can expand very quickly. YouTubers, while there's probably more in terms of raw numbers, ultimately there's less because YouTube...
Like actually posting.
Yeah, it's a long...
I technically have a YouTube account, but I don't post right now.
Yeah, that's because YouTube takes some commitment. It's long form.
Yeah.
It's just like...
For TikTok, I've had it for a lot less, but I've lost followers.
Yes, before TikTok there was Vine. There's always some short form video.
Yeah, just a short comedy video.
Yeah, because it takes less work. Because the impact is more instantly gratifying.
I wish I was like there when Vine was popular, instead of just hearing about how great Vine is.
Yeah, you could have enjoyed Vine or even been big on Vine.
But a lot of Vines are being posted to YouTube and TikTok.
Yeah, most of the Vine people moved over to TikTok, absolutely, for sure. YouTube does support short form now, and they're actually promoting it more. They make automatic little channels of your short form stuff, and they have the ability to post.
I don't think making the new channel automatic.
Well, it's not so much a new channel as maybe a playlist within a channel that they call shorts. Yeah, a new playlist within a channel. So it surfaces up stuff that might have been lost before. So, you know, I'm sure there's tons of accounts out there that have lots of little clips and it just gets lost in the mix. And YouTube is like, how can TikTok make its a total existence over this? And on our platform, you can't even find that stuff. So they're surfacing it. It's all about the filters.
Yeah.
All right, she's had enough of that. So I've always found long-term very easy, both to produce and to consume. I'm a reader. On one of the videos I linked to recently on my Mike at 11 channel, it's not really a channel so much as a playlist and a website, but I am finding YouTube videos that give advice that I would have liked to have given myself, and one of them is the top 20 things most people don't know until it's too late. And among them is that most people stop reading after college. They leave college and stop reading. If they ever really willingly read up to that point anyway, implied being that people don't read unless they have to, unless it's part of lessons for school. And, you know, I read short books back to like when I was like 10, Addie's age. I was reading the Danny Dunn books, learning about firefly invisibility drones when I was 10, back in the 70s. You know, I guess that was just when it was turning into the 80s. And then when I was 12, I switched from those short books made for kids to the longer form books made for adults. I started out having come back from summer camp here in the Poconos, Camp I forget the name of the camp, but it was near Lake Wallenpolpack, one of the largest artificial lakes, I think, in the United States. But there was a science camp, an all-boys science camp, and it was sleepover, and I only went for 1 month, but it had a profound impact on me. I learned a lot of my magic there, not the removable finger trick, that was from my mailman and sort of seeded my interest, but I learned, you know, how to make cards disappear and a lot of hand magic. But I also played Dungeons and Dragons with a group there, and the world in which our campaigns were set, I later learned by reading a book jacket in the bookstore, was from the Thomas Covenant series. Thomas Covenant, white gold. I'm wearing this white gold wedding ring because of the Thomas Covenant series. Highly significant to me. And I went through the first 6 books, and then like an additional 3 for a total of 9 was published much later in life. In my, you know, late 40s, I discovered the last 3 books of those series that was centered around Thomas Covenant's son and the final purpose and meaning of the white gold and the imperfection of alloys. It was all very well done. And then after I finished the 6 books of the Covenant series, Lord Fowl's Bane, The One Tree, and so on, I switched to The Hobbit. I'm like, well, I just read something quite different. It was very different than what I expected. It had rape scenes, it had self-hatred, it had people who didn't want to be there, who didn't believe in anything that was going on. In fact, his nickname was the Unbeliever, Thomas Covenant the Unbeliever. And he was a writer who got leprosy and went really sour and bitter on life. And it was such an interesting counterpart, a foil, in opposition to, contrast to The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings, which I read in Israel in the following summer when I was 13 years old on my own personal, you know, Alice in Wonderland, and Dorothy and the Wizard of Oz type adventures. It included a visit to Israel by a very generous friend and his family, Guy Brookstein and his wonderful family. Took me to Israel for summer, and that too was only a 1-month experience like the overnight science summer camp the year before. But these 2 experiences in rapid succession did a lot of formative things in my mind. And all this fantasy literature surrounding magic rings and strategy and control and campaigns and epic stories and fates of the world definitely got into my brain, got into my psyche. And I did not get through the whole Lord of the Rings series. I stopped somewhere in the 3rd book, The Return of the King, because it just got so boring. Once Sauron was defeated and Saruman cast out of his tower, it's like, oh, well, everything's, you know, back to normal. The legend of Frodo Ninefinger and the ballads and everything. Except, spoiler alert maybe? Who hasn't seen it? Well, I couldn't get through when Saruman and Wormtongue went back to the Shire and took it over, and there was one more battle and one more liberation to be done close to home, which I guess had its own important message in it, but not for me because I had to put it down. And the next time I experienced that stuff, other than years of Dungeons and Dragons, at which time I knew what everything was based on and derived from, which was nice, I did not experience it again until in the theaters. And even then, I forget the exact timing, but it was certainly somewhere around the early 2000s when I was going to New York. By 2006, I was resettled in New York. By 2007, I was married and was leading a very different life, of which long-form things did not play a part anymore. Long-form books, no. Long-term movies, not so much. So I don't think I even saw the third of the movies, in ironic continuation of, a pattern. I might have, by some means or other, seen the first two Lord of the Ring movies, but then the third one I only just watched at home. And it all sets in on me how significant just that fact alone is, how much that reveals to me about myself. As much as I fancy myself as a long-former, someone who can take the boring, who can take my medicine and get the benefit of the experience, I too was defeated by Tolkien's long, droning style. And he was a linguist, and he was very into backstory and building things up in layers. So it was subtle, not as subtle as Dune, but subtle nonetheless. And I couldn't take that subtlety by the time it was still at that peak of, difficult to decipher writing at the end of book 3. So I just shut it and put it down. Now the movie killed Saruman in his tower, or not so much in his tower as falling out of his tower. And that was a surprise, because even though I didn't finish The Return of the King in book format, I did read enough to know that Saruman disappeared only to reappear later in the Shire. And apparently the cinematic audience, the mainstream audience, similarly lacks the patience, so they just changed the story around in an otherwise incredibly faithful to the books, so much as I recall, adaptation. And I'll probably read the books again in not too long. Like, I started rereading the Thomas Covenant series, because when things affect you that profoundly in life, and there's so much to be drawn from, comparing and contrasting the characters, the book series, it's worth doing. Old favorites. You don't have to stay in explore mode forever and ever. You can go back to an exploit mode. It doesn't come across well in English, but it's the explore, exploit, switching back and forth between old favorites and things you enjoy, guaranteed successes, that's the exploit, versus the explore, which is the trying new things. And so I am re-listening to on Audible Algorithms for Life, Algorithms for Living, which gets into these things with different classical algorithms like one-arm bandit algorithms or multi-arm bandit algorithms, actually. And at 50 years old, what I would perceive as about halfway through my life, and it's really resonating with me. It's a perfectly appropriate book, because explore, exploit. How much of my life am I really going to put into trying new things? So, in my 30s, I guess it was, I moved off to New York City because I was in Philadelphia, in the immediate Philadelphia vicinity, for most of my life. The furthest I went was out to Commodore, which was in Westchester, Pennsylvania, and one of its spin-offs, Scala Multimedia, which was in Exton, Pennsylvania. And that was the extent of that, proverbial 30-mile circle that most people have during their entire lives. And I listened to that commencement speech, one from back during Reagan days, I forget who gave it, but it says you should move to New York and live in New York, but not too long so that you become too hard. And then you should move and live in LA or the West Coast, but not so long as to become too soft. I have not had my California experience yet, and I've only ever been out there a handful of times, and it is something of a blind spot. But one of my friends growing up, Mark Rifkin, when it came time in that great 28s, you know, when you reach that time in your life where, you know, go west, young man. I was thinking about going west, but I was too tied to Scala. I was in the exploit phase of explore, exploit. And, you know, regrets I have a few, but too few to mention. My life would have been very different had I followed my gut and gone out West Coast before even the .com boom. You must understand that this now, I graduated college in '92. My first bunch of Scala multimedia experiences were 94, 95, 96. I had to take over my dad's check cashing store upon college graduation. That was a terrible experience. I had to shoot a guy. I'll talk about that sometime, or I actually have. And I did my first big move, which was to Virginia. I expanded my 30-mile radius to maybe a 300-mile radius max, more like 150 miles. Learned about a couple of beltways, the Maryland Beltway and then the DC Beltway. Very confusing because driving down I-95, first you encounter one beltway and then you encounter the other, and people give you directions when you hit the beltway. So on my first time down to Scala, it might have been for a job interview, I went around the Baltimore Beltway one whole time, corrected myself, continued down I-95, realized there was a second beltway for DC, and then got out in Herndon, Reston, Virginia area, got my job there, resettled myself in Virginia for a few years, and then just moved back to Philly in Pennsylvania when my mom went crazy, disappeared, reappeared, and when she reappeared, she settled in the Philadelphia area. So I got my butt back to the Philadelphia area. Just when I thought I got out, they pulled me back in. Family, Commodore circles, and as it turns out, SEO, search engine optimization, the job, field, career that what I did for Scala evolved into, starting out as a production manager for all their packaging of their software products back when software came in boxes. I did a bunch of that, especially on the US side. I had my Norwegian counterparts who continue to be friends to this day. I was in Norway for about a month. Yeah, a month in overnight summer camp, a month in Israel, a month in Norway. These are some of my formative experiences. Spend a month away somewhere. It'll change your life. Take opportunities when you have them. So moving around, going away, coming back, staying mostly tightly East Coast based. So I became, you know, a little broader East Coast based, bigger circle. But still did not go out west. California, West Coast still continues to be a bit of a blind spot for me. I've been there. I've been to all kinds. I've been to San Diego for Scala work. I've been to Washington State at the Microsoft campus for Scala work. Scala got me all around the country and world. I've been to Switzerland again for about a month. I was in Switzerland for Scala work. And I was in Scotland for a few weeks, again for Scala work. And then I got spoiled to traveling. Not spoiled traveling, but I did not like to travel after that. I had too many negative associations, but I can't let that carry over to my family. And I especially can't let my West Coast blind spot carry over to my family. So even though VidCon is canceled this year, I broke it to Addy at the beginning of this video. Yes, we were going to do, VidCon to carry on our tradition. We started in 2018, another wonderful formative experience for me, but mostly for her. We did Comic-Con next year, skipped last year, and this year was going to be VidCon again. And they canceled it, so we're going to keep the West Coast trip because I have some non-refundables. We've got a nice bed and breakfast reserved not far from Disneyland, and so we'll be doing a mostly Disneyland vacation. Maybe visiting my friend Mark Rifkin if he's in town during that time. My counterpart during my Commodore and Scala days. He's the one who got me into Commodore. So talk about catalysts in one's life. First there was Ed Flacco, who got me into the Commodore Amiga, putting down the Macintosh for what it was, and boosting up the Amiga for what it was, flickering crashes and all. And so that, more than anything, changed the course of my life. But then our mutual friend, Ed Flacco, and my mutual friend, Mark Rifkin, said, oh yeah, the company who makes that is just, an hour's drive away. And by the way, I work there. I'm like, what? And it was founded by a Holocaust survivor, so it's even deeply tied to our Judaism and tribe. I'm like, wait, what? And it's like, oh, well, he isn't there running the company anymore. In fact, he's been kicked out, and it's a bunch of pirates, Irving Gould and Mehdi Ali, running it. But still, the computer's awesome, and you should come visit. I'm like, what? And so by that time, I was the president of the local Amiga Computer Users Group, POG, Philadelphia Amiga User Group, that ironically, POG, P-A-U-G, Philadelphia...
POG has another meaning, right?
Well, mine came first. My meaning
That's
came first.
poggers.
Yeah, anyway. POG. I was a POG.
No, Dad, more about POG.
What does it mean by modern days? If you can say it, don't ruin my video. No, forget it. Tell me later. So, I volunteered to become the president of that group, mostly just to secure the room at Drexel University, because we were losing the guy who got us that room, and the people who took over really running the group, Tony Antonuccio, I owe him a lot, especially pointing out how similar the Amiga computer was to Unix, real computer science stuff that was going on behind the scenes, changing, creating the information age, really, because back in those days, it was all disconnected home computers and mainframes, mini computers, supercomputers, university computers that people like me never saw or had access to. So there was this whole other world where they did things properly, which I've really come to fall in love with. I've fallen in love with the Unix way, Unix Haters Handbook and everything. So if you want to know a little about this world, read the Unix Haters Handbook. You can get it in PDF. And all that tradition has carried over to Linux, and it's just, mildly been improved over the years, according to the 80-20 rule. Good enough is good enough. Mediocre rules the world. But mediocre over a long enough time has all its rough edges polished and becomes fortified, and all the good bits shine and can't be displaced or surmounted. Try displacing Unix/Linux these days. Well, Linux has greatly supplanted Unix, but they're almost the same thing. Bell 9 from Bell Laboratories, the heir apparent to Unix, has not displaced Unix because, too much change is too much change when good enough is good enough. And there are love-worthy bits in that. Don't let that turn you off to the tech, okay? Even stuff that evolved through, practical jokes. What Ken Thompson created isn't Multics, it's for one user, Uni. Oh, so we'll call it Unix, right? A lot of wordplay. Probably by this time even my daughter understands the wordplay of Unix. And so it was an operating system with its balls cut off as a single user operating system. But it easily ported from machine to machine and turned out to be the perfect platform for the TCP/IP, or the distributed networking stack created by Vint Cerf, to be created on, which opened the doors to ARPANET, which opened the doors to internet, which, yes, Al Gore really did fight to make the military implementation of a distributed network created to survive nuclear blasts accessible to more than just the military. And it opened up to universities, and from there it opened up to the world. However, the work of Vint Cerf did not reach its fruition or its climax or whatever until the work of Tim Berners-Lee, a UK guy, layered on top of that with the web. So the web, with a point-and-click user interface sitting on browsers and hypertext, that point-and-click took advantage of the TCP/IP distributed networking stack, which took advantage of the Unix stack, which was made available through military industrial research and development. So that's the story of the internet and the web, and how it propagated so massively and quickly in an unstoppable way, and turned the information superhighway, which was intended to be brought to you by the heir apparent of Multics, which never happened, right? Multics never really took root. Unix, derailed it. But the heir apparent to Multics was the information superhighway being brought to you by the cable companies, who wanted to bring you it over their, cable pipelines. This is before cable internet. It was a different kind of, internet. It wasn't the internet. It was not distributed at all. It was utterly centralized, very timeshare, very having a meter installed to charge you for every use, the way Multics was intended to be. So, the Unix disrupted Multics and improved the world, made it a much better, less dystopian future that we live in before that. And then the web disrupted the set-top box-based information superhighway, once again improving the world, making it much less of a 1984-like dystopian future with Big Brother looking at you. Instead, we all are now Big Brother. So instead of getting too much attention through cameras unintentionally pointed at you, people are feeling they're not getting enough attention from the cameras they deliberately point at themselves. And this is better. This is better. With 8 billion people in the world, somewhere around that, all coexisting without any of the filter events like nuclear power or genetic engineering having wiped us out yet. We're here sitting pretty going, yeah, we evolved primates, nuclear power, we can handle that. The ability to genetically engineer the big bad bugs survived, and so on into the future. We will go through more filter event tests, but honestly, so far so good. I am way more of an optimist than the nattering nabobs of negativity who surround us and who have very large megaphones in modern media. Let me tell you this. The world is not so bad. The genocide is horrible, but the genocide is mostly tribal country-based. Little tribes taking over little countries, having their chance to be in charge for little stretches of time as technology, democracy, and parliamentary elections chip away at their corners. And there are setbacks. North Korea is a setback. Afghanistan's a setback. However, these little pockets of, and of course there's places in Africa which are always set back with recurring tribalism and recurring civil wars that's sometimes encouraged by the Blackwater type powers that be, because it's good to have standing wars and, money to be made for mercenaries, as it turns out. I don't believe that, but enough people do, so that these tiny, flash pans of, wars are always taking place somewhere. That is a lesser evil than, say, fascism taking over the world. We dodged a very, comic book-like bullet in World War II. It could have turned out very different. And superhero-like, personalities rise up and evolve, like, Oppenheimer and Einstein and the whole quantum gang, to change the world and to put the power of that world in the correct hands. Von Neumann, innovation after innovation that first went to the Germans, and then smart enough to defect from fascism and to help, places where, all humans can have a fair chance. It's not really that fair. I understand that socioeconomic conditions make it more fair for some than for others. However, 80-20 rule, just like Unix, just like Linux, just like the web. Sometimes the least bad of multiple options, given a chance to evolve and improve over time, can become love-worthy. And what we have with our representative democracy, our electoral college, as broken and occasionally misfunctional as it is still a love-worthy thing. We are still in a meritorious society. Our leaders are not those who can just talk a good talk and then hold on through tyranny. They can talk a good talk and get hold of power through tyranny, but they can't hold on through tyranny. We've seen that over and over. Royalty-like families like the Kennedys and the Roosevelts and the Bushes and the Clintons can't just gain power and then hand power back and forth between the two families. We've seen that cycle broken, again, through technology and the internet, and Barack Obama, of course. And sometimes when a family gets hold and they really are a tyrannical monster responsible for much more deaths than Trump ignoring the COVID outbreak, right? George Bush Jr. ignored his intelligence after coming into power, and the intelligence from the Clinton administration said something's going down, and George Bush Jr. says, oh, well, that's from a prior administration, we won't listen too carefully. And when it actually does go down, I won't even stop reading this book to this classroom I'm reading it to. Oh, heartwarming, the kids are so important, but number one duty of the president, right? He should have stopped with the class, got his information, and locked down all airports and stopped, say, for example, the Saudi family from fleeing, and had more bargaining in getting to Osama bin Laden. When there were no good targets in Afghanistan, he should not have targeted Iraq because there's good targets there. That's just stupid. That's monstrous. And the world is the way it is today. Who's arguing over the mess we're in today with Afghanistan? Was it, Trump, or, is it Biden? It's neither. Trump nor Biden got us into our mess with Afghanistan today. It was George Bush Jr. and to some extent even Senior wrapping up his 100-day war, not taking Iraq's, capital. They could have kept going. And again, not suppressing air flight. Mistake of the father, mistake of the son. Not suppressing air flight after the first Gulf War, the 100-day Gulf War. Allowing those helicopters to move around allowed Saddam Hussein and, you know, his Republican Guard and all those people to escape and to you know, extend things and to thumb their nose at the United States. You stop air travel when stuff like that goes down.
How long is this project video?
Oh, I'm going to wrap up soon. We're almost back home. But,
How long have you been recording?
oh, this is up to about 35 minutes. Pretty typical for me. I go on different rambles. I'm going to try and bring it back home. I try and wrap it up to my original points.
Yeesh, what are you, Deku?
Yeah, it's part of my point about long-form media. Your dad can just talk and keep talking. It doesn't go through the refinement process. I don't do all the editing, the self-editing that long-form really needs, but neither did JR Tolkien. Who's gonna edit JR Tolkien? Oh, Saruman comes over and takes over the Shire and has to be one more to whatever, Tolkien, you just do it. And so, you know, I'm repeating those mistakes. Life is too short to edit. You know, other people, if I really become some sort of blowing up, breakout success, other people will come back and edit my stuff and they'll go, oh, really? He was saying this stuff back then? I can't believe he was saying it then. He had all the answers, but it was hidden in these long, unedited rambles. The alternative is that AI systems, maybe one's machine learning systems, maybe one of my own design, can be set loose on my videos and edited into much more consumable bits for the mainstream. However, it will of course be much too late to do any good in my lifetime for me, but maybe future generations for what it's worth. Yes, I'm a little bit narcissistic, but aren't we all? We are all born narcissists because we are born helpless infants who cannot even lift our heads up off of the the surface we're lying on. We're that helpless. We're born not being able to breathe ourselves. We need a slap to start breathing. We're born, you know, and then we cry out. We go, "Rah!" and someone feeds us. And that is the birth of narcissism, right? You cry out and your needs are taken care of by someone who takes care of you. So you learn to manipulate your parents. Manipulation, exploitation, these are not great words in the English language, but they're the best we've got, 80-20 rule. And when those patterns don't go away, it becomes adult narcissism. And there's a big movement on the internet, on Instagram, with people giving advice regarding narcissism, saying you can't change. Once you're that way as an adult, it's set. You know, it's just not true. They are only people who are resisting the growing process. And you can grow starting at any time if you just have your eyes open. The hardest part is taking the first step, allowing the fear and self-doubt to wash over you. It's like the, you know, Dune litany on fear, which is deeply meaningful to me, all right? There's 2 sci-fi series that are everything, that carry most of life's messages in a trilogy-like sci-fi format. And they are, of course, The Lord of the Rings and Dune. And if you're only gonna do one set of long-form trilogy-type stuff in sci-fi, it's those 2. Says someone who couldn't get through one of them to the 3rd book. So, you know, projection, right? We are what we complain about most in other people. I'm trying to grow through and get beyond my narcissism. I don't call out for people to provide for me so much anymore. My dad died when I was 21. My mom died when I was in my 40s. I mean, who's gonna come and take care of me? I'm one of these people who's all alone in life. My sister went off in her own direction, and I was estranged from her already through childhood. My cousins and uncles and stuff, well, some of the worst advice I got in my life has come from my uncles, who are nothing but put-down artists, you know, where everything they do is some implication of how they got everything right in life and how poor Michael had bad parents. So, yeah, in hindsight, I had some pretty bad parents, but don't we all? Yeah, you can't change your parents. You just, you know, deal with the cards you're dealt with and try and be a little more self-aware and try and leave behind old patterns of behavior that are, you know, repeating your mistakes, that are causing you to repeat your mistakes, because the definition of stupid is not learning from your mistakes. So if I still was allowing my narcissistic tendencies to rule portions of my life, I would be stupid and not making forward progress in life. However, you know, whenever I complain about stuff, I remind myself of projection and say, what is that I'm telling myself about myself? And I realize what it is, and I make these tiny adjustments. And I'm a very open book with it to Addie, making sure, you know, she sees her dad growing. And, you know, that's it. The rest is probably oversharing. Going back to Pennsylvania, doing it in the Poconos, which was my playground backyard growing up, making my playground backyard growing up where I am normally. So all things vacation are right there, right? I just went go-karting with my daughter this weekend, with it being, you know, 10 minutes away from where we live. And when you're bored of the go-karting, you use the same tickets to go over and do miniature golf, and then maybe some paintball. We didn't do the paintball yet, but that's coming up. It's just target stuff against the wall. But with this comes body confidence, comes tool confidence, all kinds of benefits that spring out of this, which I don't think I got early enough in life. So most of the things I did not get early enough in life related to things that should happen in your Dorothy, Alice coming of age phase of life, I'm making sure my kid gets.
Dorothy, you get my cat.
Yeah, talking about your cat.
Dorothy Vader McSmarthy.
Dorothy Vader McSmarthy.
Schmarthy.
So this is almost 45 minutes in. I suppose that's long enough. I'll be at my destination soon. And yeah, that was a good one. Thanks for joining me, all you out there. Thanks for joining me, you back there, kiddo. And if you have anything, parting shots to say to the world, this is when to say it.
What?
Perfect.
No, Dad, seriously, I didn't hear you.
Hey, if you have anything you want to say before I sign off.
Go watch something actually funny.
Go watch something funny. Good advice.
No, actually.
Actually funny.
Insulting your video, Dad.
Thank you. And that would not include Tolkien, because Tolkien is apparently humorous. I think according to, I forget who it was,
Daddy.
Matilda, or might have been Matilda. Matilda thought Tolkien was humorless.
Which Matilda?
Oh, Roald Dahl's
The one
Matilda.
that I know.
Oh, well, I gotta read you the book one if you don't know.
No, I mean.
Yeah, it might have been the book.
I knew a person named Matilda.
Yeah, no, it was a sci-fi, a fantasy character who thinks Tolkien was humorless. I forget which one it was, but Matilda comes to mind. It was a criticism of Tolkien, even though it had its humorous moments. There, you know, Gimli, the rivalry between Gimli and Legolas was awesome. A lot of humor in that. So that's it. Go watch something actually funny, and don't forget to subscribe.
Or don't.